Monster Hunter Wilds marks its 21 years in gaming. 21! Granted, that's not much compared to the other Capcom franchises, it still shows us how far Monster Hunter has come. It was huge in Japan, spawning multiple titles, spin-offs, expansions of expansions, even before it exploded into popularity all over the world with, well, world. It's basically Japanese Call of Duty. Okay, I'm kidding. But you know, just like how COD's legacy standardized a particular format of first-person shooters, Monster Hunter popularized this formula of hunting giant creatures and carving them up for parts so you can hunt more giant creatures. So it's no surprise that we've had some Monster Hunter clones throughout the years, some of which are kind of outrageous. I know Monster Hunter Wilds is all the rage right now, but if you're the kind of person who's biding your time before buying it for whatever reason, you might want to join us today as we take a quick look at some of these Monster Hunter likes. Hey guys, it's Hex again. This isn't just a video about these MH clones, but also our way of appreciating what Monster Hunter has done so well to maintain its status as the apex of the genre it created. First things first is that we gotta make it clear what a Monster Hunter clone is. I'm sure many of you watching already have an idea, but it's worth defining for now. These games follow a mission-based structure that will often involve fighting a boss, usually in the form of a giant creature. It's also something that is designed to accommodate cooperative play involving more than 3 people, usually 4, but we've seen some games go up to 8. Materials gained from the environment and from defeating said bosses will contribute to a progression system involving a lot of crafting to strengthen your character, which could then be used to fight stronger monsters. And then you repeat the cycle. In traditional MH fashion, this was in the form of newer weapons and armor sets, but you'll soon find out how other games tend to express this differently. So yeah, that's the formula. Sorry, no Horizon Forbidden West or Elden Ring for this one. Wild Hearts! Yes, the Wild Monster Hunter game before there was Monster Hunter Wilds, but it had a lot of heart. Boo! No, seriously, jokes aside, this is one of the more fun Monster Hunter clones I've played. And it leaned more into scratching that HD graphics Monster Hunter Worlds itch that Rise couldn't necessarily give. While being faster and more accessible than Monster Hunter, Wild Hearts still presented a satisfying weighty feel on both the player and the monsters. The animations were great overall, and it still maintained that methodical pace that we love. What made this game unique was your ability to spawn various infrastructure instantaneously to alter the course of the hunt. You could make bulwarks, mounted hammers, and springboards to launch the player away or towards a monster, complete with special attacks. Heck, you could just make boxes to gain a height advantage, and that already puts a good spin on the MH style combat. That's not even talking about the platforms you can leave on the hunting grounds that shake up how you interact with the environment. But Wild Hearts is also lacking in variety in terms of monsters, gear, and weapon types, on top of the fact that it runs like absolute dung on PC. Just check out our review of the game we did 2 years ago and you'll see. It's going to be a common theme in MH-inspired titles to be more streamlined and as a result, more shallow and less varied compared to the systems featured in Monster Hunter. But like we said, Monster Hunter has been here for almost 2 decades. It put in the time to polish its flaws and expand its gameplay and roster of monsters. That's why the later games are able to support thousands of hours of gameplay. Sadly, Wild Hearts in particular is no longer being given updates by EA. We were really looking forward to fixes on an otherwise really good game that had a lot of potential to compete with MH. What we do hope for the likes of Wild Hearts is to keep trying, to keep improving. Imagine if Capcom just flat out gave up just before Monster Hunter Tri. That would have been such a waste. God Eater is perhaps one of the most recognizable MH clones out there. It had its own following during the PSP days, just like with Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, and has since then spawned a few sequels, each coming with expansions and remastered ports, which does feel kinda weird since MH already feels very anime as it is. But looking at this, they probably mean way more anime, like edgy shonen anime. This is also funny because they also made anime Dark Souls. But I digress. It looks appealing right off the bat. Even if you were a fan of MH, the idea of taking that formula and applying it to an over-the-top post-apocalyptic sci-fi setting where you fight big mutated organisms just sounds really awesome. God Arcs are the highlight of the experience. They're huge weapons that can transform into guns and can also morph into a mouth that can devour monsters. Devouring monsters is part of the progression system where you can enhance your abilities. That's why it's called God Eater. Combat is significantly faster and more frantic than MH, and you can tell by all that you're seeing how this game really sets itself apart from the original formula, despite being one of the first ones to compete against MH in its own game. However, this led to God Eater feeling more arcadey than Monster Hunter. It was easier, more accessible, and gets right down to the combat. Monster Hunter wasn't just about the fight, it was about the hunt. The environments were a core part of the experience. You had to interact with the world to procure items that would aid you in taking down the monster. Sometimes in the form of traps, healing items, buffs, ammunition for certain types of weapons, and even things you'd use for maintenance. Especially in the older titles, you'd take into consideration the monster's place in the fictional ecosystem, and that knowledge aids you in tracking the monster down. Despite the unique setting, God Eater's level design feels bland and simply serves as a stage to fight the Aragami. Yes, there are pickups to be found, but it doesn't compare to scrounging bone piles and picking up crafting materials like in Monster Hunter. Combat is generally easier in God Eater, and while its aim to be different deserves a ton of respect, it sacrifices that rewarding feeling one can get from Monster Hunter's weighty combat. Each weapon plays very differently, while still allowing enough complexity for it to be compared to that of a fighting game. Monster Hunter is the opposite of twitchy. It's very methodical, demanding the player to study the monster, their positioning, and knowing when to commit to an attack that would be easily punished if miscalculated. So, when you see that well-animated blow connect to an opening just as you planned, oh boy does it feel and look great! A lot of what I said about God Eater also applies to Freedom Wars, another anime-inspired hunting game with a really cool premise. It's also unique since it features up to 8 players in various operations. You even had a grappling hook similar to Iceborne's Clutch Claw. I'm kidding, that was an oversimplification. But you get the point. You guys should definitely check out Freedom Wars now that a remaster is out. Which was a pleasant surprise because there were a couple of hidden gems of Monster Hunter likes just like it that were forgotten because they were PlayStation Vita exclusives. Another notable example of that is Soul Sacrifice and its expansion Soul Sacrifice Delta. Soul Sacrifice is one of the biggest reasons why we look forward to innovation in the Monster Hunter formula. Instead of weapons and armor, the gameplay loop involved crafting a huge repertoire of spells, allowing the player to create vastly unique loadouts. It also had unique mechanics such as sacrificing fatally wounded allies or parts of your own body to initiate powerful but desperate attacks. Even dead allies could play support from the spirit world. It's a game filled with crazy ideas, and we hope that this game will get a remaster like Freedom Wars did. Heck, maybe even give us a sequel. We just want this IP back. Even Hideo Kojima joined the Monster Hunter craze. A lot will argue that Metal Gear Solid Peacewalker isn't like Monster Hunter because it's mostly tactical espionage action and operations. However, it's difficult to truly separate it from Monster Hunter. Not just because of the grand boss fights against tanks, helicopters, and giant AI mechs that you can play with up to 4 players, but also because it tends to have parallel gameplay loops associated with the hunting genre. Instead of crafting weapons and armor, missions reward you with resources and manpower to improve your organization, which in turn affects your R&D department, granting you better equipment to deal with more difficult missions. If that wasn't enough, they also offer a Monster Hunter control scheme in the options. Like, it literally says Monster Hunter. You can even fight Rathalos and Tigrex as Snake. That's not a DLC collab, it exists in the base game. So yes, if a stealth shooter managed to put a spin on it, the possibilities for this genre are endless. Some of you may have noticed I didn't talk about Dauntless. The recent update leaves a lot to talk about, especially concerning how it altered the nature of the game, so we weren't sure if we wanted to include it on the list. If you guys want, we can even make a video about it. Just like what we said, a lot of these MH-inspired titles are never going to compare to Capcom's 2 decades of polishing their IP. That's why we don't just believe in innovating upon the formula, but to also keep believing in it by taking the risk to put in sequels or ports. Monster Hunter is a great franchise. Despite the various clones, there's still nothing quite like the way you hunt monsters. There's also nothing quite like its weighty combat. The series has a bright future ahead, especially with the release of Wilds. You can check out our thoughts on the game so far right here. We just hope that games that follow in its footsteps will also be given more chances to shine. There you have it. We love Monster Hunter and the games like it. What about you guys? Any games we missed that deserve more love? Let us know in the comments. If you want to hear us talk more about video games, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Again, I'm Hex, and we'll see you in the next hunt.